I sent a harsh message to my wife. She was far away traveling with her lover and had no idea I knew what was going on. While they thought they were fooling me, I was watching everything fall apart. I saw every bit of the betrayal, every lie that pretended to be love building up in my mind like a bomb about to go off. She thought she was in control, that I was clueless, and her weak excuses about work trips would cover up her time with that man. The different perfume, the nicer clothes, the quiet moments during dinner. I noticed it all. I wanted to trust her, to believe it was just a rough patch, that the distance between us was temporary, but the truth was right there. A text on her phone, forgotten, confirmed my worst fears. She was with me, but her heart and body were with someone else. I stayed silent for a while. I tried to figure out how we ended up here. Did I do something wrong? Did I stop being the man she needed? I spent so many sleepless nights trying to understand the signs I had ignored. But eventually, I couldn't ignore them anymore. My heart was broken and all I could think about was how she had ruined everything we had. The man she chose. Did he know she was married? Did he know what he was risking? While she was with him, I felt the urge to end it for good. I picked up my cell phone and typed the most cutting message I could imagine. I know everything. There were no more lies that could save her. No more excuses that could erase what she had done. With a simple tap, I sent it and I waited. The silence that came after was suffocating. Imagine her face when she read that message. She should have been in bed with him at that exact moment. Did you look at your cell phone and your heart stopped, or did she pretend to him that everything was fine while she felt the ground disappear beneath her feet? What did she think? What did she feel? Fear, blame, anger. I didn't know it, but my anger was growing by the second. There was no going back. She had crossed the line and now the world as she knew it was about to fall apart. How could I look at her the same way after all? How could she face me knowing that her body already belonged to someone else? I picked up the cell phone again. I couldn't hold back. Where are you? I already knew exactly where she was, but I wanted to hear her lie again. I wanted to see how far she would take it. Then her reply came, I'm at the conference. I'm going to bed early tonight. The nerve. She was so confident in her lie, acting like I was clueless, like I didn't know anything. I couldn't help but smile. It was a bitter smile of someone who no longer had anything to lose. I typed quickly, conference at the hotel where you and he are staying. The silence time froze. I knew that on the other side she was desperate. The truth had been exposed, naked and raw. I could imagine her with a cell phone in her shaking hands, trying to understand how I knew, trying to find a way out, an excuse, anything that could minimize the damage. But there was no escape. She didn't respond. And I stood there looking at my phone, waiting for something to happen. Maybe I wanted to hear a confession. Maybe I wanted her to beg for forgiveness. But none of that came. Just silence. A silence that screamed everything she didn't have the courage to say. I could have left her to suffer there alone with her lover. But something in me needed more. I wanted to see her. I wanted to look into her eyes and feel the weight of betrayal fall on both of us. I bought a ticket to the place where they were. Time at the airport seemed to slow down, but my mind was racing. What if when they arrived, they were still together? Would she have the guts to face me? On the way there, I pictured how it would go. Maybe she would cry, get on her knees, and beg for forgiveness. Or maybe she would keep lying, saying it was only once or that it didn't mean anything. But what bothered me most was not knowing what I would do. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to believe there was still something worth saving. The other part just wanted to hurt her the way she hurt our marriage. When the plane landed, My head was filled with scenarios and possibilities. Every step towards the hotel felt heavy, as if the ground was about to collapse beneath my feet. I picked up the phone and without waiting any longer, I called her once, twice, 3 times. No response, but something was wrong. When I arrived at the hotel, I heard something I didn't expect. His name, an accident. The lover who stole her from me was involved in an accident. And suddenly everything changed. What was a revenge plan was now something bigger, darker. I didn't know how to react. She was alone, scared, and the man she cheated on me with was on the verge of death. How did it all end up here? How did fate become so cruel, so sudden? The betrayal which before burned inside me was now swallowed by an emptiness. What would I do now? Her silence on the phone, the tears that I knew were already beginning to fall on the other side, were no longer because of the betrayal. She had lost more than I could ever take from her. Robert stared out the office window, his eyes focused on the far-off horizon, as if he was looking for something he couldn't see. His life seemed to follow the fast pace of the busy city. But inside, everything felt stuck. He had this feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint it, and it was slowly eating away at him. The walls of his office, covered with trophies and souvenirs of his career success, no longer gave him the joy they once did. He was a successful man, a manager at a big company with a good marriage and a comfortable home. To anyone looking from the outside, he had it all. But inside, the emptiness seemed to grow each day. Claire, his wife, had always been a steady, comforting presence in his life. Ever since they met in college, they had built a strong relationship filled with trust, passion, and respect. Claire was sweet and charismatic, and whenever she was around, it felt like she could brighten any room. It was this glow that made her so loved by her friends and admired by those who knew her closely. Robert was proud of her and the life they had built together. There was a balance between his professionalism and her more creative and lighter side, who worked as an art curator. Their marriage was seen by many as an example of partnership and trust. However, over the past few months, Robert has started to notice subtle changes in Claire. She seemed more distracted, more absent, as if something inside her was changing without him knowing why. She had always been dedicated to her work, but her work trips were becoming more frequent and longer. Initially, he had accepted it as part of his professional routine, understanding that exhibitions and international events were an essential part of his career. But recently, these trips had become so constant that he barely saw her during the weeks. Claire had always been an independent woman, and Robert loved that trait about her. But now, there was something different. She seemed more reserved, more distant. And although he tried to convince her that they should spend more time together, there was always some commitment, some event that required her attention. He wanted to believe that it was just the demands of the job, that maybe she was going through some pressure. But behind this thought, a persistent discomfort was growing, something he couldn't name. But it was there, present in every small gesture, in every smile that seemed a little more forced than normal. The night's glare was away, became long and lonely for Robert. He found himself adrift in his own home, surrounded by memories of happy times that seemed so far away now. He sat on the couch watching TV, but his mind wandered, reliving the days when her laughter echoed through the room. The long conversations about her projects and dreams. The warmth of his presence seemed to have slowly dissipated, and Robert couldn't shake the feeling that somehow he was missing something. But what was it? He still wasn't sure. One night, Claire came home later than expected. She was wearing an elegant dress, something she usually saved for special occasions. Her perfume was stronger, a sweet scent that filled the room. Robert, sitting in the living room chair, watched her walk in with a polite smile on his face. "How was the event?" he asked casually, trying to hide the curiosity that was building inside him. She sighed, taking off her shoes with a sense of relief. "Exhausting. These dinners always end up being the same, but it was okay. I have another early meeting tomorrow. So I'm going to bed now." Robert nodded. But something about the way she said it bothered him. There was a lightness in her voice, a lack of detail in her explanations that didn't fit with Claire's usual style, who tended to get excited when talking about the works of art she discovered or the artist she worked with. But he chose not to press. Not at that moment. The following days followed a similar pattern, always with an excuse about work. She was distant, both physically and emotionally. There was a chasm forming between them, a silent, painful space that Robert didn't know how to bridge. The intimacy they once shared seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a cold, mechanical routine. He tried to get closer, suggested trips for deeper conversations, but he always came up against the invisible barrier that she had built around herself. She was there, but at the same time, so far away that it was impossible to reach her. Her phone vibrated more frequently, and when he asked who it was, she responded vaguely, saying it was from work. Deep down, Robert was beginning to question himself. Had he done something wrong? Was he not giving her the attention she needed? He spent long hours at work, often busy with meetings and deadlines, and wondered if this had somehow created distance between them. But no matter how hard he thought about it, he couldn't find a clear answer. As the emotional distance between them grew, the house, once full of life, seemed to reflect how Robert felt inside. The rooms were quiet, meals were quick with little conversation, and even relaxing evenings had turned into lonely moments. He missed Claire. He missed the woman he had married, but now she felt like a stranger, someone he couldn't connect with anymore. Robert started noticing small things he hadn't before. Claire always had her phone with her more than usual. She rarely left it out, and when she did, the screen was always face down. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who doubted her. But it was hard not to. But suspicion had already planted its seed in his mind, growing with each gesture, with each evasive answer he received. Her cell phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was a message. Robert hesitated for a moment, his heart racing. It wasn't in his nature to invade her privacy, but something compelled him to pick up the device. He unlocked the screen, and what he saw made him freeze. There on the screen, a short, simple message, but one that carried immense weight. "I can't wait to see you again." His mind tried to process what that meant. There was no name, just an unknown number. But he knew. Deep down, he knew what that meant. When Claire got out of the shower, he was already sitting on the bed, his cell phone in his hands. His gaze lost somewhere in the distance. She noticed the phone in his hands, and for a brief moment her eyes widened, but soon she regained her composure. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice so calm, it almost made him doubt what he had just seen. He didn't respond. Not at that moment. He just left his cell phone on the bed and left the room, his heart heavy with a certainty that he still didn't want to face. From that moment on, everything between them changed. Robert stayed awake all night, staring at the ceiling as the hours passed slowly. The silence was overwhelming. Claire slept peacefully, unaware of the storm of thoughts in his mind. What he saw on her phone kept playing in his head over and over like a tape that wouldn't stop. That short, simple message had been enough to turn his suspicions into certainty. And now he couldn't ignore the truth anymore. He tried to focus, to think of a logical solution, but his mind kept betraying him, showing him images he didn't want to see. Claire with another man, laughing and sharing secrets, moments that used to be only theirs. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship was shattered. In the middle of all this chaos, Robert wondered when things had started to fall apart. How had he missed it? Dawn arrived without relief. He got up from the bed, exhausted, and went straight to the kitchen. Claire was still sleeping, and for a moment, he thought about waking her, confronting her once and for all. But there was something that held him back, an instinct that made him wake. He knew the betrayal existed now, but he didn't just want assumptions, he wanted answers. He needed to see it with his own eyes. At work, he could barely concentrate. His mind was miles away, planning what he would do next. Conference later in the week. Another business trip that before Robert would have accepted without question, but now sounded like an empty pretext. He knew this would be his chance, and this time he wouldn't sit on the sidelines, waiting for answers that might never come. On the morning of the trip, Claire seemed especially cheerful, a sparkle in her eyes that Robert hadn't seen in a while. She dressed more carefully, chose a perfume he knew she reserved for special occasions. She tried to say goodbye briefly, as if she wanted to avoid long conversations. But Robert, this time, observed every detail with a controlled coldness. The smile she gave him as she said goodbye seemed filled with something he couldn't name. Guilt, perhaps, or the certainty that he was still blind. "I'll see you when I get back," she said with a quick kiss. Already moving away towards the door. "Of course," he replied, keeping his voice calm. But inside, the tension was building up. As soon as Claire left, Robert pulled out his phone and started taking action. He knew this was his last chance to find out the truth. Claire's phone wasn't around, but he had other ways to track her. He knew the route she usually took and the flight she often booked. With the tools he had, it was easy, and in the end, he already knew enough. This time things wouldn't be like before. He wouldn't wait around for small bits of attention or listen to the empty excuses about work meetings. Robert bought a plane ticket to the same city Claire would be in, determined to see her with his own eyes. Part of him still wanted to believe he was wrong, that maybe there was an explanation, but deep down he knew. "I knew what I would find." When he arrived at the hotel, his palms were sweaty and his stomach was churning with a mixture of nervousness and suppressed anger. He walked slowly through the lobby, feeling the weight of each step. In his mind, 1,000 scenarios played out, all leading to the same outcome: betrayal. He tried to stay calm, take deep breaths, and not let the emotion overwhelm him. "I knew I needed to be meticulous. I needed to be sure." The hotel reception was elegant and understated, a perfect reflection of the kind of place Claire would choose for a date. He knew he couldn't go straight to her room without attracting attention. So, he positioned himself in the lobby watching. The clock ticked down like a relentless hammer, and every minute that passed seemed to increase his anguish. He wondered if he had the strength to continue, to see what he was about to discover. And then he saw her. Claire got off the elevator, her hair loose and well-groomed, wearing a light and sophisticated dress that he didn't recognize. Beside her, a man, tall, elegant, with an air of confidence that made Robert's blood boil instantly. They laughed together as if they were in a world apart, oblivious to the watchful gaze that watched them from a distance. Every laugh, every affectionate gesture between the two was like a stab in Robert's chest. Here was the confirmation he feared so much. Claire was no longer his. She had given herself to another man, and now he had the proof right in front of him. The betrayal he had sensed deep inside was now real and undeniable. For a moment, he couldn't move. He just stood there watching them walk away from the hotel, hugging each other, unaware he was there. What should I do now? His first instinct to confront her was drowned by a wave of despair. What could he even say? What would words change in that moment? As he watched them disappear through the door, Robert felt a mix of anger, pain, and resignation. He knew he couldn't just leave things as they were. But he also knew he needed time. Time to think, to understand what I would do next. But what came after would be even more devastating. He just didn't know how deep the abyss before him would become. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with conflicting thoughts, Robert walked away from the hotel, the image of Claire and her lover engraved in his memory. The silence in the room was unbearable. Robert stared at the cell phone screen, his fingers still without the courage to send the last message. The weight of the discovery seemed to crush him, and everything around him seemed to go blurry, as if the world around him no longer made sense. He knew what he had seen. He knew what he had witnessed with his own eyes. Claire was no longer the same woman he had married. Something had broken. Something that could never be repaired. But still, a part of him resisted accepting the truth. As he fought the urge to explode, to confront her once and for all. His cell phone screen lit up with a new notification. It was a message from Claire. "I'm feeling homesick. I can't wait to go home." The irony of that sentence hit him like a punch in the stomach. He knew exactly where she was and who she was with at that moment. The image of her with her lover in the hotel was still vivid in his mind, fresh as an open wound. Robert suddenly stood up from his chair, feeling a rush of anger. He could no longer run away or put off the inevitable. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was time to confront Claire. But this time, he wouldn't send messages. He needed to see her face to face and feel her reaction when she realized everything was out in the open. With determined steps, Robert walked to his car and drove without a destination, his mind racing with thoughts. The day was bright, but inside him was a darkness that felt all-consuming. He tried to picture what their conversation would be like and how Claire would react when he confronted her. Would she cry? Would you beg for forgiveness? Or would he try to lie until the last second, making up excuses he knew he could no longer accept? As he approached the hotel where he knew she was staying, Robert's heart skipped a beat. He parked the car on a side street away from the main entrance. The plan was simple. He would wait for her to leave and confront them both. He needed to look Claire in the eye when she was unable to hide behind her lies. Time passed slowly as he waited, the tension growing by the minute. The hours seemed to drag by and Robert felt every second like an eternity. Finally, he saw Claire leave through the side door of the hotel. She was alone, her face pale, her eyes hidden behind large sunglasses. There was no sign of his lover, and for a brief moment, Robert felt a strange mixture of relief and frustration. He got out of the car, approaching her with silent steps. When Claire saw him, her eyes widened and for a second she seemed to freeze in place. The shock on his face was undeniable. She didn't expect to see him there. "Robert," her voice trailed off, almost like a whisper. The anger he had held in until that moment finally exploded. "I could ask you the same thing, Claire. What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice sharp with anger. He could no longer hide. She slowly took off her sunglasses, her eyes showing fear and surprise. "I can explain." "Explain what?" "Explain why you're leaving a hotel you should never have been in. Explain who the man is that you're with. Tell me. Claire, what do you think you can explain?" Claire started to fidget nervously, her hands shaking as she tried to come up with an answer. She knew there was no way out. "Robert, please. It's not what it seems." "Isn't that what it looks like?" He gave a bitter, incredulous laugh. "What is this?" "Because what I saw was very clear." "Do you have any miraculous excuse for this scenario?" She took a step back, almost out of breath, the pressure of being cornered starting to get to her. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want you to find out like that. Robert shook his head, feeling his anger growing by the second. So, what did you want, Claire? Did you want to keep lying to me? Did you want to pretend our marriage still exists while you run to another man? Claire's eyes filled with tears. But Robert felt no pity. Not this time. She had betrayed everything they had built together and shattered the trust between them. I lost myself. Claire finally admitted, tears streaming down her face. Things changed between us. I felt alone and disconnected. He was there. The words hung heavy in the air. There was no escaping the truth now. Claire knew she could no longer hide it. Robert watched her, feeling the weight of it all on his shoulders. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming. But he also felt a strange relief at finally hearing the truth. What did you expect me to do? Robert asked, his voice lower, almost a whisper. For me to just accept it? For me to pretend nothing happened? Claire sobbed, unable to answer. She knew there was no going back. What she had done could not be undone. And now all that was left were the consequences of her actions. I loved you, Claire. I would have done anything for us, for our life together. His voice cracked, betraying the pain he was trying to hide, and you destroyed everything. She tried to get closer. But Robert took a step back, raising his hand as if to prevent any contact. No, I don't want to hear anything else. There is nothing more to be said. The silence between them was suffocating. Claire continued to stand there motionless while Robert tried to process everything that had happened. The betrayal was exposed, but he knew there was something more, something she hadn't said yet. He could feel it. I just need time, she murmured, her voice breaking. Time? Robert repeated in disbelief. What do you think time will fix? Do you think this can be forgiven? She shook her head, wiping away her tears. I don't know. I don't know what to do now. Robert looked at her for a long time, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and maybe a bit of pity. I don't know either, Claire, but I do know this. We are over. He turned slowly and walked away, leaving her behind. Her image, broken and regretful, was burned into his memory. The weight of betrayal was heavy. But something inside Robert warned him that the worst was still to come. He just didn't know how deep the chasm would be. Robert walked towards the car, his hands shaking with adrenaline and anger. Each step seemed to weigh more than the last, as if his legs were made of lead. The encounter with Claire had left a deep scar, and he knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same. But at the same time, there was something incomplete, something that still disturbed him. It was her silence, the way she hadn't told everything, as if there were still more secrets hidden beneath that betrayal. He got into the car and remained there for a few minutes, breathing heavily. Claire's face, desolate and soaked with tears, replayed in his mind. He wanted to hate her. He wanted to tear apart every memory they had built together. But no matter how hard he tried, the pain of losing the love they had once shared suffocated him. He had fought so hard to keep the marriage, to preserve what they had, and now it all seemed like a cruel lie. As he tried to calm his mind, Robert's cell phone rang. He hesitated, Claire's name flashing on the screen. For a moment, he thought about not answering, but something inside him compelled him to listen to what she had to say. He pressed the button to accept the call without saying a word, waiting for her to speak first. Robert. Her voice was hoarse, filled with despair. Please listen to me. I know I hurt you, but I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the tension course through his body. What else could you tell me, Claire? Isn't what you've done already enough? No, it's not just about that, she replied, her voice shaky. I didn't want to tell you like this. I didn't want to hurt you more than I already have. But I don't know how to say it. Robert stayed quiet, feeling his heart race again. He knew something was coming. But this time, Claire's words carried a different kind of pain. Something deeper and darker. Just say it quickly, Claire. He finally said, his voice low but firm. Get it over with. She took a deep breath before speaking. David, the man you saw me with, he had an accident. Robert felt surprised and confused. What are you talking about? After you left, he got nervous, tried to get away from me, and ended up in a car accident. I don't know what to do, Robert. He's in critical condition. The silence that followed was brutal. Robert processed the words, trying to understand what they meant. Claire's lover, the man who had destroyed her marriage, was now on the brink of death. Cruy had intervened in a way he could never have predicted. And why does this interest me? Robert finally spoke, his voice cold and devoid of compassion. Does this change anything, Claire? He's dying and you still betrayed me. None of this erases what you did. I know, she sobbed. And Robert could hear the desperation in her voice. I know it doesn't change what I did. I know I hurt you in ways I may never be able to fix, but now everything feels so out of control. He could die, Robert. And I don't know what that means for me. Robert shook his head in disbelief. For you, Claire? Are you worried about what this means for you? The man you cheated on me with is about to die, and you think I should feel sorry for you? No, that's not it, she pleaded. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't know what to do right now. I lost myself, Robert. I completely lost who I am, and now I'm stuck in all of this with no way out. For a moment, Robert closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. She was trapped. But what about him? Wasn't he also trapped in a cycle of pain, anger, and betrayal? What Claire had done couldn't be changed. But David's situation added a new layer of chaos that he didn't know how to handle. You're right, Claire, he finally said, his voice cold. You are trapped. And you know what's worse? You did this to yourself. I gave you everything, every part of me, and you destroyed it. Now you need to deal with the consequences. She sobbed on the other end of the line. Unable to respond. Robert knew he had reached a breaking point. The pain in her voice made it clear, but he no longer felt the desire to comfort her. It was empty. I'll leave you alone, Claire said, her voice almost trailing off. I just wanted you to know what was going on. You have the right to know. He felt a whirlwind of emotions inside him, but none of them led him to a solution. Finally, he just said, Goodbye, Claire. He hung up the phone, letting the weight of the situation wash over him. The betrayal had been a stab in the chest, but what came now was a different pain. It wasn't just about what Claire had done. It was about what it all meant for the future. He knew he couldn't continue living like this. Trapped in a cycle of resentment, faith had taken an unexpected turn, and Robert no longer knew what to expect. David was on the brink of death. Claire was in ruins, and he more than ever felt lost in the mess his life had become. With his head bowed, he took one last deep breath, trying to find clarity. But all he felt was emptiness. The sound of the phone dropping on the table echoed in the quiet room. His hands were still gripping the steering wheel as if his mind was trying to take in everything that had just happened. Claire's words kept playing in his head, mixing with a feeling of emptiness he couldn't understand. The betrayal, the confession, David's accident. Everything felt confusing and far away, like he was watching his life happen without being able to change anything. He got out of the car slowly, his steps heavy on the pavement. The chill of the early evening made him shiver, but that physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional storm building inside him. A part of him was still trying to accept that at that very moment, the man Claire had cheated on him with was fighting for his life. The irony hit him hard in ways he couldn't explain. The hatred he felt for David before so clear and burning was now mixed with a strange feeling of indifference. As if life itself was taking charge of the betrayal. But why didn't he feel relieved? Robert walked aimlessly, lost in his thoughts, trying to understand what his next move should be. He had imagined so many times what it would be like to confront Claire, what it would be like to expose the betrayal, and perhaps even find a way to move on. But now, the chaos that followed the confrontation seemed to have created a much deeper dilemma than he could have anticipated. David was on the verge of death. Claire, racked with guilt and fear, was sinking into a pit of regret from which she may never emerge, and he, Robert, found himself trapped in a web of conflicting feelings. Did he still love Claire? Did he want to save her? Or did you simply want to get away from it all and let the consequences take their natural course? In the distance, he saw a small diner, its lights shining in the darkness of the night. His nervous stomach made him realize he hadn't eaten in hours. He entered the place, feeling the sudden heat that contrasted with the cold outside. The simple, peaceful environment felt like a momentary refuge in the midst of the storm her life had become. Sitting in a corner, Robert ordered a coffee and stood there observing the few people who still occupied the tables. There was something comforting in the normality of that scene. In the banal routine of strangers who went about their lives without knowing the turmoil he was facing. For a moment, he wondered what it would be like to live without this pain. He thought about what it would be like to return to a time when everything was simple, when his marriage was a safe and loving place, not full of lies and betrayal. The coffee came hot and bitter, but he hardly noticed the taste. His mind was far away, recalling memories that felt distant and unreal. He remembered their wedding day, the smiles, and the promises they made. He remembered their trips and the small talks that always ended in laughter and making up. Most of all, he remembered the look in Claire's eyes that once made him feel loved. But now that look felt different. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't forget the betrayal. A moral dilemma started to form in his mind. He knew that even though Claire had messed up, David's accident had really shaken her. She was broken, racked with guilt, not just over the betrayal, but over the fact that someone else's life hung in the balance. Could he just abandon her in that state? Let her sink alone in a sea of regret and despair, or would he be able to forgive her to help her through this? Even if it meant letting go of his own pain? Robert had no answers. He realized that the future he imagined, a future where he could walk away from Claire and rebuild his life on his own, wasn't as simple as he had thought. He was stuck at a moral crossroads where none of the choices seemed fair or right. As he absently stirred his coffee, Robert's cell phone vibrated on the table. It was a message. Reluctantly, he picked up the device and saw that it was from an unknown number. The content of the message was brief, but loaded with urgency. David won't resist. She needs you. He read those words over and over, feeling the impact of each one. She needs you. As much as he tried to walk away, as much as he wanted to ignore what was happening, he knew there was a bond between him and Claire that couldn't simply be severed. The betrayal hadn't completely destroyed what they had. There was something deeper, something he couldn't define. Robert paid the bill and left the diner, feeling the cold night air invade his lungs. The mind was buzzing with questions. Should he go to her? Could he forgive Claire for what she had done? Or was that impossible? As he walked back to his car, he slowly made up his mind. He didn't know what their future would be like, or if he could ever forgive her, or if they could rebuild what they had lost. But he did know one thing. Claire was alone at that moment, dealing with the consequences of her actions and the chance that a man might die. Even though the betrayal had hurt their relationship, he couldn't just leave her to face it by herself. With shaking hands, he started the car and drove to the hospital where David was. The night felt darker now, and with every kilometer, he felt more uncertain. He didn't know what he would find when he arrived, nor how Claire would react to his presence. But deep down, something pushed him to continue. Maybe it was the last vestige of love that remained. Or maybe it was just the need to put an end to that story once and for all. When he finally arrived at the hospital, Robert felt his heart sink. The building lit by cold lights, scarier than it should have been. He got out of the car, each step towards the entrance carrying the weight of everything he had faced so far. He knew he was about to face the biggest dilemma of his life. The hospital felt even colder inside. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the strong white light of the corridors created an impersonal, almost inhospitable environment. Robert walked slowly, feeling each heartbeat echo in his mind. The uncertainty of what was to come weighed heavily on his shoulders, but there was something inevitable about that moment. It was no longer a question of choosing a path. He was already too involved. He followed the directions to the room where Claire was. As he approached, he saw her sitting in a chair with her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking silently. She was devastated. There was something about her posture that made him hesitate for a brief moment. For a second, he wondered if deep down there was still something that could be saved between them. Her eyes swollen from crying. She seemed to have aged years in a few hours. There was something broken about her that Robert had never seen before. The pride and confidence that once defined Claire were now just a shadow of what she had been. Robert stood at the door, his voice weak, almost a whisper. "I didn't know you were coming." He wasn't sure what to say. There was so much left unsaid between them. So many words lost in what they used to be and what they had become. He didn't know if he had the strength to confront her again. "I don't know why I came," he admitted quietly. "But I'm here." Claire looked at him with pain and relief in her eyes. She seemed to be asking for compassion, for something that could help her out of the sadness she was feeling. But Robert didn't know if he could give that to her. He had been hurt and betrayed, and the scars were still too fresh. "He won't survive," Claire said, taking a deep breath to hold back her tears. "The doctor said it's a matter of hours." Robert stayed silent, taking in the news. David, the man who had ruined his marriage, was dying. Part of him thought he should feel satisfied by this, but he didn't. There was no revenge, no relief, just a bitter feeling that no one would come out of this story unheard. "And you?" Robert asked, his voice cold. "What will happen to you now, Claire?" She shook her head, unable to answer right away. "I don't know. I got lost, Robert. Now everything is falling apart. I hurt you. I ruined our marriage. And now David. He's going to die because of me." Robert looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had spent days and nights thinking about what it would be like to confront Claire, to finally see her broken by guilt. And now she was exactly as he imagined. But instead of feeling satisfied, he just felt emptier. "It's not just because of you," he said. "Finally, he made choices, too. You both did." Claire stood up slowly, crossing the small space between them. For the first time since it all started. She tried to get closer, her eyes pleading. "I know I can't change what I did, Robert. I know this cannot be erased, but please, I just wanted you to know that I regret it." Every day, He felt the tension in the air, the weight of what was to come. She was expecting something from him. Maybe forgiveness, maybe a last gesture of compassion, but he didn't know if he could give her that. Not yet. I believe you regret it, he said, voice heavy with weariness. But regret doesn't fix anything. It doesn't erase what happened. She bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears, and looked at the floor. I know. I just wish things were different. Robert sighed, feeling the heaviness of the decision he had to make. He knew that no matter what he wanted, things would never be the same again. At the same time, he felt that staying there with her would only drag him down even more. I'm leaving, he said plainly. Claire looked at him scared. What? He repeated. I'm leaving. I can't stay here any longer. I can't be with you anymore, Claire. She stepped back, her eyes wide with shock. But what about us and everything we went through? We no longer exist, he replied. The cold words cutting the air between them. What we had, you destroyed. I'm not perfect. I know that. But what you did cannot be fixed. I need to move on. And you too. Claire stood there in shock as he turned to leave. Tears were streaming down her face. But Robert didn't look back. For the first time in months, he felt like he was in control of his life. He realized that the best thing he could do was to walk away. As he left the hospital, the heaviness of his decision started to lift, and he felt a strange sense of freedom. He had finally made the choice he had been putting off for so long. Claire had made mistakes that couldn't be fixed, and he knew he couldn't save something that was already broken. Although the pain was still there, it was starting to change into something he could eventually get past. That night, Claire would watch David die alone and filled with regret. Unable to fix the damage she had done, Robert knew she would carry that burden for the rest of her life. He got in his car and drove down the empty road, feeling peaceful for the first time. There were no more doubts. He had nothing to fear anymore. The future was still unclear, but he knew that for the first time, he was ready to face it alone. Second story. I'm a 32-year-old woman, happily married to the man of my dreams. I have everything my parents and I hoped for when I got married. We have a 2-year-old daughter and I feel so blessed. My husband means everything to me. But one night while we were up watching movies and not really talking because of a small fight we had the night before, he suddenly started laughing. I sarcastically asked him to share his joke. He said there wasn't anything funny, but then he told me, laughing, that I had messed up so much in the past. I admit I told some little white lies, but nothing serious like cheating. He said the only reason I was still here was because of our daughter sleeping between us. My heart broke. How could he say that and laugh at the same time? I felt devastated and numb. We moved on. But those words stayed with me, haunting me during our many little fights. Then I made a big mistake. A handsome colleague caught my attention. We talked every day and grew close. One night we both had to work late and things escalated. He took my hand, led me to the changing room, and we ended up together on the counter. The way he held me was incredible. Now I realize I've fallen for him. So what should I do?